Thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate you taking your time out from your busy schedule. First and foremost, thanks to our marketing team to organize such good events. That's Will and Shav. Appreciate you guys doing all that you do for us. And a special thanks and welcome to Sam. Sam's from CERT NZ. He's a senior analyst there, I think just over a year now. And he's kind enough to join us and give us a good revision of the latest 2022 critical controls, and later he will take us through the life cycle of ransomware and how I guess it works, and divide it in 3 sections. Once Sam is done, I will quickly give you a quick glance of the 10 critical controls based in 2022, and then how soft solutions technology relates to those critical controls. We'll leave the Q&A right till the end, just so we can get the most for you. But there is a question section on the in your the GoToWebinars thing. Please write down all the question answers. We're more than happy to go through them right at the end with myself and Sam. So Sam, over to you, mate.
Thanks very much, Ash, and thanks for everyone for coming along today. My pleasure to be here and talk to you about our critical controls as well as our ransomware lifecycle diagram. We'll jump straight in. Kind of already gone over the topics that we'll discuss today, but very, very quickly, just a bit of an introduction into who CERT New Zealand is, what we actually do. So CERT New Zealand basically stands for the Computer Emergency Response Team, and that's a conceptual thing. Many nations around the world have CERTs, many organizations around the world have CERTs. But ultimately, our goal is to improve cyber resilience, online safety for all New Zealanders. We support businesses, organizations, individuals, just whoever might be dealing with a cybersecurity incident. But it is important to note that where organizations of national significance or critical national infrastructure are involved, that's when our colleagues at NCSC step into the field. Basically, our bread and butter is providing trusted information and advice for individuals or organizations. So when a report comes through to us, we attempt to respond to that with some actual actionable advice for the victim so that they can remediate and recover from the incident that they're dealing with. Part of the collecting of reports that we do is trying to collate a profile of the threat landscape, what's currently going on in New Zealand in a New Zealand context. And just a link to our website down the bottom there. A lot of the information we go over today is freely available on our website, so I encourage anyone out there who's curious to jump on there and have a look at what there is. We won't hesitate any further. Critical controls. So year by year, we update this relevant to what we're actually seeing in New Zealand, what reports we've received, and what seems relevant to keep organizations safe. So not too many changes from 2021 to 2022. One of them was updating one entry that we had, secure internet exposed services, and updating that to asset lifecycle management. So securing internet exposed services is pretty straightforward, exactly as it sounds. So any services that are unnecessary or unused, disabling, segmenting, or hardening these services, especially where they're internet exposed. Internet exposed services as a common vector of intrusion, as we'll talk about when we discuss the ransomware lifecycle diagram. So hardening and disabling those services wherever possible is key. What we've done is we've upgraded that to asset lifecycle management, which is a little bit more holistic. And what we're actually talking about here is maintaining an up-to-date and accurate view of your environment. So your software assets, your hardware assets, and actually what stage these assets are in. It might be the initial stage of purchasing or development. It might be maintenance, so it's embedded in your daily practice, or it might be decommissioning. One of the important keys here is being mindful of legacy software and assets. So something's no longer supported by its vendor, it becomes legacy, and it's not going to receive those ongoing updates in terms of vulnerabilities and security updates. So being aware wherever you might have legacy assets and either decommissioning them and upgrading to a new one is really important. Securing internet exposed services comes into play here, so keeping track of your assets and actually monitoring which ones are internet exposed and which ones need to be disabled or segmented or hardened. That's the first update to the critical controls this year. And the second one is a more slight change, but updating application allow listing to application control. Very similar in what we mean by these things. Ultimately, application allow listing is having a whitelist, it's also known as, of applications that are allowed to run with the idea being that you prevent any unauthorized malware or programs from executing on your computer. Application control is just a little bit more robust, a little bit more holistic. So it's actually looking at specific software packages, what's allowed to run, what isn't allowed to run. And the idea here is to ideally prevent any drive-by downloads, unintentional downloading from websites or malicious emails containing malicious attachments, and stopping them from actually getting onto your computer in the first stage. So where application allow listing looks more at stopping those things from executing, application control looks more at stopping them from even getting onto the computer in the first place. Those are the two updates that we've made this year, and I'll talk about how they come into play in terms of the ransomware diagram, but I also just want to mention that as we go through the diagram, as we talk about the mitigations and where they're placed in said diagram, a lot of those mitigations are covered on our critical controls list as well. I think today we'll discuss about 9 of 10, so pretty broad coverage there. Very quickly, just discuss what ransomware is. I'm sure most people in this audience knows, but type of malicious software that denies access to a victim's files or computer systems unless that victim pays a ransom. So anyone can be a target of ransomware. Ultimately, if you are online, if you have information about your clients, about your customers, anything like that, you can be a target. If no longer having access to your systems and your data will disrupt your business, then you're a potential target for ransomware. And typically those impacts on victims include disruption to the business and operation, as I've said, no longer able to access those files, those data, those systems, disrupts your day-to-day activity. Monetary loss if you are ultimately backed into a corner and you do end up paying that ransom, you're losing that money there, as well as reputational damage. As we all know, as organizations suffer these kinds of attacks, it can impact their sort of public image and their reputation within their client base. Just a link along the bottom there where all this information is sort of packed into one, including the diagram and a bit more of a step-by-step guide. So again, I encourage anyone to have a look at that site, our site for the information. But this is the diagram as we've discussed. So we'll talk about the three different segments to the diagram as we go on, but ultimately we've got initial access here, so this is how the attacker gets into the system, consolidation and preparation, and this is ultimately the lateral movement within the system as they try to gain access to as much as possible, and finally impact on the target. So this is when your data is actually encrypted or exfiltrated, or things like your backups may be destroyed for persistence of the ransomware. You'll notice the hexagonal shapes implemented in the diagram. Those are the mitigations that we'll talk about today. You can see the critical controls key along the bottom for how the colors match up to what critical control. But as I say, as we discuss the mitigations, I'll show you where they're actually implemented in the diagram, and we'll get into the three sections a little bit deeper as well. One other note to make is that as we move from left to right, there's a scale of time there, but it's not always the same. It changes very much depending on attack, from attack to attack, and it's not uncommon for attackers to sit within systems after they've gained that initial access in order to move laterally and try to gain as much access as they possibly can. So first of all, that initial access phase. What we're talking about here is how the attacker gets into the system, and ultimately it comes down to three different avenues. Typically, it's either through valid credentials using internet exposed services, and those valid credentials might be gained through a number of ways. It could be an employee has fallen victim to a phishing campaign and provided those credentials that way, or it could be that there's a weak password that's easily guessed or easily cracked by the attackers. And through those internet exposed services, as we talked about, they gain access to the system. Next is the exploitation of vulnerabilities, as we're moving down the list there. And as we know, exploits, vulnerabilities pop up in software all the time, and they're exploited for access into the systems. Again, that asset lifecycle management comes into play here. But last but not least, we also have malware. So that's typically either delivered through an email with a malicious document attached, or other means like that. So malware gets into your system and often creates an avenue for access for the attackers. Those are the three main avenues, and we'll discuss the mitigations that come into play a little bit later on. We'll just go through the other phases. So next we have consolidation and preparation. And this is the phase where an attacker's gained access, they're in the system, and ultimately what they're trying to do is move laterally or escalate their privileges. So trying to gain as much access to as much of the system as they possibly can, trying to escalate the privileges on whatever user accounts they may have used to gain access, or trying to move to other user accounts in order to escalate that privilege that they have. Ultimately, they're trying to get access to as much of the system as possible so they can make the impacts as devastating as possible to the victim. Which brings us to the impacts. And first and foremost, this one's actually at the bottom, but it's that encryption of data, the most common impact when it comes to ransomware. So victim no longer able to access their systems, their data, and that causes massive disruption to their day-to-day activity. At the top is data exfiltration, and quite interestingly, what we've seen in the past is that this can actually serve to create a two-pronged ransomware attack. So the data is encrypted initially. Hypothetically, let's say the victim pays the ransom, they get their data decrypted. The attacker then comes in with the second prong saying, we've actually exfiltrated all your data, and what we're going to do is we're going to release it online unless you pay another ransom. So it's a kind of a two-pronged attack, but it also can come into play at the start to just make that initial ransom more likely to be paid by the victim. And then in the middle there, last but not least, is the destruction of backups. So this is kind of a persistence thing for ransomware in order to stay on the system and make it less likely for the victim to actually be able to recover. And backups are really important when we're talking about ransomware. So that brings us to our mitigations. And the first one that I actually wanted to talk about is backups. But first of all, just a link to our critical controls here. Arsh is going to run through them very quickly, but they are online, all in one place, easy to access for anyone who wants to have a look. So backups. Ultimately, backups are your golden ticket, #1 recovery tool when it comes to ransom. That's going to allow you to get back up and running without having to pay the attacker's ransom. There's a couple really key things that come into play with backups. So the first one is making sure that they're stored securely. Now, I've said offline here, but ultimately what we mean is storing those backups in a location different to your operational network. So if your operational network, your operational systems are hit by ransomware, the idea is to make sure that the backups are in a different location so that that ransomware can't actually gain access to said backups. As we discussed, that is something quite common in ransomware attackers, that they try to find the backups, destroy the backups in order to make sure that the victim can't actually recover themselves. So it's really important to make sure we've got them in a secure place, separate from our operational network, so that we can recover from those backups if we are hit. And the second point that's really key here is making sure those backups are regular. So regularly updated, you're actually regularly backing up your systems, but also checking those backups to make sure they're not compromised in any way or not corrupted or anything like that, so that if it does happen, you can actually restore from those backups. And this is going to depend on organization. Excuse me. This is going to depend on organization capacity in terms of how often these backups are done, but the more often, the better. The idea here is that if you can restore from backups that were created 2 days ago, you're going to have a lot more data retention. You're going to be able to return to operation a lot more quickly than you would if you were restoring from backups that are 2 months old. Bit of a balancing act there between the organization capacity and doing it as often as possible. But backups remain the #1 tool for recovery from ransomware without having to pay the actual ransom. And as we can see here, it's actually only implemented in one place on the diagram, just at the end there before destroying backups. The reason for this is that it's not in and of itself a mitigation. It's not going to stop the ransomware coming in, but it is the #1 recovery tool. So I think, personally, I think it deserves its own little segment on the side there. It's the #1 recovery tool if you're hit with ransomware. It's what's going to allow you to get back up and running, as I've said, probably 3 or 4 times without actually paying that ransom. So next control that we have is two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, two-step authentication, verification, lots of different names for it, all the same thing. And what we mean here, everyone in the audience probably knows, second layer of protection in addition to your password. So the idea here is that if an attacker gains valid credentials and they try to use them in order to access your system, they shouldn't be able to get past that second layer, that multi-factor authentication, which might be a code sent through another device. It might be a biometric input required through another device, a one-time password, anything like this. But even with those valid credentials, the attacker shouldn't be able to get into the system because of the two-factor or multi-factor authentication that's in play. An interesting stat from Microsoft that I want to include here is that according to Microsoft, up to 99.9% of account compromise attacks could be prevented with FMA. So that's not all cyber incidents, of course. This is specifically account compromise attacks, but as we saw in the first stage of ransomware, those valid credentials, those attempts to compromise valid accounts is one of the main intrusion vectors. So something that's very easy to implement and can have huge impacts on your security is multi-factor authentication. Can't be understated how important that can be in terms of keeping your system safe. So looking at where that comes into play, there's a couple points after the valid credentials before those are actually used to gain access. That's when multi-factor is going to keep you safe. But also if they're already within the system and they're doing that privilege escalation, they're trying to move to other users that they can compromise. Say they move from one user that they've already compromised to another one, they shouldn't be able to get into that other user's account because that two-factor is in place. So the couple stages where it comes in. I've also highlighted password managers in here just before password guessing, kind of along the same trend in terms of how it's going to keep you safe against the use of those valid credentials. I'm sure everyone knows what password manager is, but basically the idea here is to use a password manager in order to store all your passwords, allowing them to be really long, really strong and unique passwords that aren't easy to guess, aren't easy to crack or anything like that. One important thing to add with password managers is that it can increase the risk around the single master password that you use, but the reason we still believe this to be a really strong control to have in place is that it actually allows you to put your time, your energy and your focus into just that one master password. So rather than attempting to remember 20, 30 different passwords and constantly having to change each one, it allows you to remember one single password. You can make that one password really long, really strong and really unique so that it's not going to be easily guessed or cracked. And then in turn, you've got that password manager to do the same for the rest of your passwords, meaning that we can almost wipe that password guessing aspect off the map with that control in place. So password managers are really great, not just for ransomware, but for security in general. Passwords are pretty central to security, so having a password manager in play is pretty important and major in terms of keeping ourselves safe. So next, we've got patching, and this comes into play in terms of the asset lifecycle management. But ultimately, what we mean is any software you have, any applications, any operating systems, anything like that, making sure that we're installing the vendor's patches as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, and ideally automatically wherever possible. So as vulnerabilities pop up in software, vendors are always releasing updates to address those concerns, and installing those updates is the best way to make sure that we're not going to be victims of those vulnerabilities. Like I say, anywhere that we can, setting those updates to automatically install is really key. That way we don't have to think about it. It's going to be installed as quickly as possible as soon as that update's available. And again, just talking about legacy software here. So wherever your software assets become legacy and they're no longer supported by the vendor, updating those to something that is constantly supported by the vendor is a really important key to making sure that we're not vulnerable to those exploitations. If we can't get a patch from the vendor, it's likely exploitations will pop up for those legacy software. So using that asset lifecycle management to understand where we have legacy software and then changing that wherever we can is really important as well. So patching comes into play in a few different spots, exploitation of vulnerabilities right at the start there, as well as that lateral movement. Vulnerabilities can often be used to either escalate privileges for user accounts or try to move within the system. So two really key points there where they come into play. The next one that we have is a combination of a couple, I just wanted to mention, network segmentation and the principle of least privilege. Basically, network segmentation is exactly as it sounds. It's breaking down your network into smaller segments and setting access controls limitations across those. So ideally, what we're trying to do here is limit an attacker's access once they've entered our network. So if we have a segmented network and they're able to breach one part of that, because we've actually segmented our network out, ideally, they're not going to be able to move laterally within our systems to other parts of that network. Principle of least privileges is somewhat similar. Ideally, what we want to do is make sure that users only have the minimum level of access to things that they need to actually perform their job. So if a user account is compromised, they don't have access to the full system because obviously for their job they don't need that, and this is just enforcing that, making sure that users only have access to what they need. Therefore, if one of those accounts become compromised, they don't have the keys to the city. They don't have full reign over the entire sort of system. And these come into play sort of in that middle section, so consolidation preparation. Again, as the attacker is trying to move laterally within the system or escalate their privileges, this is going to ideally stop them and keep them isolated to one part of our network. Next, we've got logging and alerting. Now, logging in and of itself is not necessarily a mitigation. What it does allow you to do is sort of track exactly what's happened throughout the incident and address the concerns and remediate the issues wherever there may be problems, so that ideally it doesn't happen again. Alerting a little bit more of an actual mitigation in the sense that as odd things are happening on your system, say users logged in at a time that they have no reason to be logging in, that might create a red flag for us to go and investigate, and it might give us some opportunity to actually stop further access occurring if we can respond to that alert in a timely fashion. So logging and alerting is really important, and as you'll notice, it's all over the diagram here. So this is basically, like I said, those logs. So for everything that happens, ideally we have some logs that we can investigate so we can address the concerns, and those alerts as well. So valid credentials used to log into an internet exposed service, we get an alert for that, and if it's not meant to be happening, that gives us something to actually go and investigate and ideally prevent any further access from occurring. And then very quickly, just a quick talk about what we're actually seeing in New Zealand. So in 2020, we had, at CERT New Zealand, we had 43 reports of ransomware. 2021, we saw 59 reports of ransomware, and that's a 37% increase year on year. Common ransomware incidents that we've been seeing include Deadbolt, Conti, and Lockbit. All the Deadbolt ones are really targeting the network access storage devices. That's a very common trend that we've seen lately. Now, I can't include the stats from this year to date, but what I can say is that it's very much on trend to see a similar increase this year if things continue the way that we've been seeing them happen. And that wraps up everything that I have to talk about today, but I'm more than happy to take any questions and answer them as best as I possibly can.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sam. It was quite informative. I definitely learned a couple of things from there. And I hope everyone did so as well. Please drop down any questions you have. More than happy to go over right after I'm done. So what I'll do, I'll make myself presenter. Give me a second. What I'll do, I'll show you my screen. Let me know when you can see my screen. I should be able to see it now. There we go.
There you go to that.
So yeah, so in this, oops. Wondering if you can still see it. Yep, there you go. So thanks, Sam, again to cover all of that. So what I'll do is I'll quickly glaze over the exact 10 controls that Sam mentioned. So let's jump straight onto the website for on CERT NZ website for the 10 critical controls that took place that are reviewed again in 2022. I believe they are reviewed on a yearly basis, so it's a good time for us to review. I won't go into the full detail. Happy to share this link later on as well with everyone, but this is 1 to 10 is what mentioned. I'll go right at the bottom where they all are summarized here. So these are the 10 critical controls mentioned by CERT NZ. So Sam has gone over a majority of them, but the rest are here. So what I'm going to do today is I will go back to my slides, and today I will cover give you a quick vendor overview on how and where soft solutions sit. Now, this is part of the PPT framework, which is people, process, and technology is what it's called. And Sam, do correct me if I'm wrong, but so today I will cover the technology element of it, where these are the vendors that soft solution has to offer, but the people and process side of things is where you IT resellers and MSPs need to come in and provide these technology as a service to fully support the critical controls mentioned by Sam and on the CERT NZ website. So it's not necessarily you use one particular technology and you raise your hands and everything is secure. You do need to provide have the right people to support it. Soft Solution has that as well, and you need to provide that as a service in a nice documented way. And it's not something that you deploy and have it going once a year. This is something that should be reviewed in a schedule or in a regular manner. So starting off, we'll go start with backup, just like Sam mentioned. These are quite important. ArcServe, which were StorageCraft in the past, that most of you remember, Shadow Protect, SPX, all the solutions are still around, still there. Giving you a quick update on the vendor themselves. So they have a customer base of 45,000 end users around the world, but in 150 countries and over. And what ArcServe specializes is it delivers a suite of data protection solutions, as mentioned on the screen, across the entire business continuity spectrum. Doesn't matter if the end customer or if the MSP is enterprise, mid-sized business, or even SMBs. ArcServe has something that will fit your portfolio. What I really find that resonates with our resellers in NZ is the ability of disaster recovery as a service that ArcServe provides to their end customers, where the RTO is so low that the ability for resellers to spin up the machines that are offline for end customers is very, very minimal, providing them full availability around the clock. More than happy to answer any questions if you have around that. Next we have is LastPass, which was GoTo/LogMeIn and a few other names, but LastPass as of today is a fully independent organization, which is good for us. So like Sam mentioned, what LastPass does, it stores, fills, and creates passwords automatically, saving yourself and your customers time and hassle in making new, strong, long passwords. So and it also easily allows you to share passwords amongst within an organization. Once an employee does move on, you can revoke those passwords quite easily. So you don't have any passwords lying around with employees that are no longer working with you. One thing I want to mention is Soft Solutions is now able to offer LastPass MSP to our channel partners. If you should already know that, but if you don't, here's the news. So essentially, this program is for MSPs, made for MSPs. And it allows you full visibility and control over end customers, and it is a integrated single sign-on and password management plus MFA solution with one central admin console, where you have, as an MSP, you have the flexibility to add or remove seats and provide monthly billing. So it's quite important, And what we find in the market is the end customers already know what LastPass is. They're already using for families, for their personal use, or the free version. So it's a quite easy upgrade or sell for IT resellers to pitch LastPass because you already are aware of the product. Next up we have is ManageEngine, which is one of our strongest and biggest vendors that we represent at Soft Solutions. So ManageEngine is the IT management division of Zoho Corporation. They offer enterprise IT management software for yourself, internal use, and for your clients as well. And the key space that they sit in is identity and access management, or IAM, unified endpoint management, IT operations management, security information and event management, or SIEM, and many more. They provide many more solutions to optimize your IT and help your end customers. We have Managed Protect. So Managed Protect is an Australian owned and operated technology company, and they specialize in best of breed cloud solutions. And easy way for me to categorize them is in three key areas: in business productivity, another one would be business continuity, and cybersecurity. An interesting fact about Managed Protect, other than what you read on the screen, is in 2021 they became a network partner with Australia Cybersecurity Centre, which now allows them to advise, recommend actions, and just in general generate greater awareness of cyber risks within the channel community in NZ, which is great. So they do back up on what they say and what they recommend. Sorry about that. Next we have is there we go, Enable, which was SolarWinds MSP, or you might remember it from GFI Max, Logic Now, I believe it's Hound Dog before my time as well. So it's definitely had many variations, which is good for the brand, good for the product, because it's matured so far along in time. But right now, Enable is a fully independent organization specializing in all the solutions that you see here. They are a global provider of, how do I describe it? Complete IT management and automation solutions for MSPs and for MSPs. They offer, from integrated monitoring, management solutions, backup, EDR, where they partner with SentinelOne, password management, and documentation management, or you can call it privilege access management, ticketing solutions, email filtering, and so many more remote control type of solutions that Enable helps MSPs in the country. We do have a lot of offers going on with RMM. If you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. Trend Micro. Everyone has heard about Trend Micro. I'm sure of that. It is the global cybersecurity leader. And a fun fact: it protects about 500,000 organizations with 250 million plus endpoints of individuals across the globe, and that's in terms of clouds, networks, devices, endpoints. Key thing I want to highlight with Trend Micro is their offering of MXDR, which is a managed cross detection response, where the resources from Trend Micro help you protect your clients around the clock, 24/7. So you don't really have to be present to make sure ransomware attacks or crypto or any sort of attacks are coming your end customers' way. Trend Micro helps you and provides full detailed white label reports. WatchGuard. So WatchGuard is the industry leading in network and endpoint security, secure Wi-Fi, multi-factor authentication, and network intelligence products and services. It's an easy way to, I guess, summarize the different products and services that they have. Around the globe, I did some research this morning. They protect 250,000 businesses around the globe, protecting over 10 million plus endpoints. Key thing I want to focus with WatchGuard with Soft Solutions is we have implemented a pay-as-you-go subscription program. So where we offer fireboxes or firewall appliances, EDR, AuthPoint MFA under this program. So it's a monthly pay-as-you-go program. So essentially you can start, stop as you required, and you don't really have to pre-purchase anything in bulk. It's more of a OpEx subscription program. So if you have any questions, more than happy to help you out. I do know it's quite useful for SMBs here in NZ especially. Last but not least, USecure. You probably mentioned there's no red critical controls mentioned below, but I still thought we should add this slide because we are finding huge interest from our resellers in NZ on USecure. So what USecure does is it helps raise your customer cybersecurity awareness with, I would say, tailored training against simulated phishing campaigns. It's a comprehensive platform made for MSPs with full automation and full white labeling capability. So essentially, each MSP has their own tenancy in the cloud portal for USecure, and you then add sub-tenants as your end customers underneath your tenancy. So the four ways you can describe USecure, four attributes or elements of USecure are cyber security awareness training, phishing simulation, policy management, and dark web monitoring. And a lot more big upgrades coming to USecure. All the pricing is monthly billed, available in NZD. Happy to answer any questions on this as well. I think I've spoken enough. So moving on to Q&A. So thank you everyone for your time. Please drop questions in the chat below. I will read them out now if I have any. Just a sec. Where is it?
Just while you're looking at that, and they maybe come through. I just wanted to add that I really liked the mention about password managers and how it's not just about managing passwords for individuals, but it can actually help with that management of passwords and credentials across organizations. As you mentioned, people leaving organizations is quite a big thing, real for all of us. And as people leave, those credentials need to be sort of addressed and managed properly. And so the inclusion of that and the use of a password manager is really, really, really cool to see.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sam. The first one we have is not necessarily a question, but a compliment. Excellent infographics. Outstanding. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
We have sort of a statement from Mike. Need more detail on the critical controls. Happy to share that, Mike, with you. So you can. There's a lot more detail available on the CERT NZ website. So yeah, definitely give you a bit more insight.
If you go to the website from the page that has all 10 critical controls, you can actually go to a different page for each individual one, which will give you a bit more information.
Awesome. There's a question from Andrew. So can attackers access offsite backups if, say, they are on a different system but are connected to main office by some kind of semi-permanent link, example site-to-site VPN or VPN client?
It's a very good question. I think it would sort of come down to what kind of software is being used and whether or not vulnerabilities exist in those software, whether or not that's known. Internet exposed services, as we've seen, is quite a common way for intrusion. So I don't want to say it's not possible. I don't want to say it's absolutely possible, but looking at the individual pieces of software like the VPN that's being used, understanding if any vulnerabilities exist for that is probably going to be a #1 key to making sure that can't happen. And using sort of a service provider that actually manages the backups for you is likely going to be another way to avoid that kind of intrusion as well. As Arsh mentioned, there's a number of people out there that do that, and they offer not just regular backups for you, but also that assistance when actually using those backups to restore and recover. So using services like that would be really key in making sure that kind of cross-contamination can't occur.
Yep. And Andrew, I can definitely take this offline with you as well, just to go a bit more detail into how some of the technology Soft Solution provides can help you out, and then you can add the people and process on top, following the PPT framework. Question from Matthew: is Sam able to share the slide deck? Sam?
Yep. Happy for that to be shared out. I'll send it through to the organisers after this. I think they might already have it, but I'm happy for that to be shared with anyone who's interested in having that. Yep.
Rob asked, he was running late. No worries, Rob. The recording is available. We should be able to share that with you, Rob. Yep. There is a question from Malcolm. Is there a one-stop reporting place? There appears to be several government parts.
Yeah, that's a very good point to make. There are a lot of government agencies that are involved in this space, and it can be quite difficult to understand where exactly you need to go. One thing that we try to do at CERT NZ is offer a no wrong door policy. So maybe what you're reporting to us isn't best set with us. Maybe it's better with police, it's better with NCSC, or it's better with NetSafe, something along these lines. What we'll attempt to do is actually contact the organisation that should be dealing with it, get the information in their hands, get that direct connection between the reporter and that agency, and just facilitate that sort of liaison with another organisation. So totally understand what you're saying. There are a lot of agencies in the space, and it can be quite difficult. But what I would say, if you don't know where to go, come to us, and we'll attempt to get it to the right people.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sam. Any more questions, anyone? If not, that's okay. Please, you can send them through to sales@softsell or my email, arsh@softsell.co.nz. Happy to help you out, and happy to, I guess, put you in touch with Sam or anyone at CERT NZ if you have any more questions on the slide deck or anything that Sam or I covered today. More than happy to help. Okay, I think there are no more questions. Again, thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so we'll let you go. And thank you everyone for attending. Any questions, do let us know. And you have a good rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.